Hello, and thank you for joining us for the next episode of the Digital Transformation of the Legal Industry webinar series. This episode will discuss an SLW digital transformation case study in billing, invoicing, client budgeting, and cost projection. This is the 7th episode in an 8-part series. If you missed any of the previous episodes, you can find recordings on the SLW Institute on the SLW website. A recording of the webinar and the slides will be made available to all registrants. Feel free to enter any questions using the Q&A feature in the Zoom menu. We invite you to follow us on LinkedIn to see news about other upcoming webinars. And with that, I'll turn things over to our moderator.
Thanks, Michelle. Steve Lundberg here, Schweigman Lundberg. Today we've got welcome everybody to the presentation. We've got a kind of an interesting, behind the curtain presentation about what goes on in the billing area of a law firm, and we've got a great lineup today to bring us a lot of perspective and some of the practical aspects of what we do. So our first speaker today is going to be Janelle Callis, who's been a speaker on many of our programs. And Janelle is going to focus on the history of billing. Janelle's practice principally is around strategic counseling and FTO and patent analytics. But today she's going to be talking about the history of billing. So we're glad to have Janelle. And then we've got 3 people from our accounting department, which is terrific department. And we've got Bob Brace, who's our executive director of the firm, also led the accounting department before his current job for a long time. We've got Sheena Devine, who's currently our accounting manager. And Sheena's got many, many years in the IP space, and as well as Kelly Ebert, who also helps us with our billing. Kelly's also very accomplished in every billing system you can think of. Andre Murray is also on the panel. Andre is going to be talking about budgeting. Andre represents a lot of large companies that have very, I guess I would call it strong needs for very accurate budget predictions. As we all know, many of our clients, the budget is to keep on track of that and make sure you hit it is as important as the legal work in some ways. So Andre is going to talk about that. And last but not least, Jill Young, who is our software manager at the firm. And she is a total expert in how to get billing into our accounting system and also transform it into the various codes and such that our clients need. So with that, I'm going to kick it off. And our first speaker is Janelle. Janelle, take it away.
Thanks, Steve. Today I'm going to talk about a brief history of law firm billing, which turned out to be a lot more interesting than I thought it would. Next slide. Okay, before the mid to late 1800s, lawyers in the United States basically charged what they thought their clients could pay. And one example of this was Abraham Lincoln. Lincoln typically charged $5 to $20, and it could be anything from putting on a trial to writing an appeal brief or anything in between. He did have one case, though, where he charged a railroad $5,000 in order that the railroad obtain immunity from paying taxes. Lincoln lost at the trial level, he lost at the state appellate level, but he won at the Supreme Court. And after all that, when he went to collect his fee, the railroad refused. They tried to stiff him. So Lincoln sued the railroad and eventually did get his $5,000. Okay, after that, in the mid to late 1800s, US legal fees were capped per service by state law, and litigation fees were usually paid by the losing party. Some lawyers were able to collect bonuses or charge retainers to circumvent the limitation of capped fees. In 1908, the ABA declared contingency fees to be ethical which opened a new source of revenue for at least litigation matters. By the 1930s and 40s, however, the nature of legal fees was set on its head by what had been a cap system and that was turned into a base system. State bars began publishing minimum fees, in most cases providing that those lawyers charged less than the minimums that were to be punished. Similarly, the ABA Model Code, which stayed in effect until 1969, declared it unethical to undervalue services. Eventually, change was necessary, and helping fuel this change in attitude was the expansion in 1938 of the federal and many states' rules of civil procedure, which made litigation potentially more complicated and therefore less amenable to flat fees. And it wasn't just litigation, it was also transactional law. Over time, lawyers complained that dentists and doctors were out earning them. Next slide. In 1958, ABA pamphlet contended that lawyers were bad businessmen in comparison to other professionals, the remedy being to better track time and keep more detailed records. That pamphlet suggested that lawyers work 1,300 hours a year or 5 to 6 hours a day, 5 days a week for a 48-week year. In 1975, the Supreme Court outlawed both the capped 1800s practice and the base system from the 1940s and held that set fees for legal services constituted price fixing and was a violation of antitrust laws. Okay. Coming in right about this time was what was called the billable hour. By the late 1970s, most lawyers charged for services based on hourly billing. However, the billable hour did not just appear out of nowhere. It was actually invented by Reginald Heber Smith in 1914 in order to increase efficiency of the Boston Legal Aid group in Boston. And Reginald Heber Smith basically invented the timesheet, and his timesheet was divided into 6-minute increments. Smith said that the service the lawyer renders is his professional knowledge and skill, but the commodity he sells is time. Later, it was found lawyers who tracked their time made more net income than lawyers who didn't track time made in gross income. And way before the 1970s, the first law firm to bill by time was Shearman and Sterling. Next slide. Okay, the 1980s saw a rise in audits of law firm invoices, first manual invoices and then automated software. This was because over time, clients came to feel that, the billable hour way of billing did tend to inflate their bills, and so they wanted to do anything they could to get their costs under control. By the 2000s, pushback from clients against hourly billing has brought back flat fee billing for much of prep process work, and software advances have resulted in each client having its own rules regarding what can be billed and how much can be charged. Next slide. And here's that picture of Reginald Heber Smith, the father of the billable hour, as well as the father of legal aid. So that was a brief history of law firm billing. I'm going to move it over now away from the past towards the present and future and introduce Andre, who's going to talk about budgeting.
Thanks, Janelle. Yeah, fascinating history there of billing in the legal profession. Thank you. Yeah, so just I'm just going to briefly deal with some budgeting issues and just mainly dealing with the question of uncertainty in budgeting. And I think this is something we really kind of battle with. We have a lot of clients who ask us for budget estimates, maybe on a monthly basis, but more typically a quarterly basis, and then an annual basis. And this can be a challenge because of uncertainties that creep in due to a number of factors. One of these particularly is, prosecution. As a patent application is making its way through the patent office, we really often don't know when an office action is going to be issued against the case, or when we're going to get an allowance. So just dealing with the US patent office and patent offices internationally inherently introduces a lot of uncertainty. Also, when estimating budgets for a year, there might be some decisions coming up, like a foreign filing decision typically, which can be a very expensive decision. If you're extending a patent application to 5 or 6 countries and filing over there, that could be a $50,000 spend, and that's a lot of money. But very often at the beginning of the year, we may have no idea, and the client may have no idea whether they actually want to foreign file a family of patents, and if so, how broadly. And that's just because we just don't have enough information as to the legal prospects of the case. We might not have seen any office actions or had any prosecution on any of the corresponding applications. And then also on the business side, if a family of if a patent family is covering a certain product, there might still be uncertainty when we are asked to produce the budget as to whether that product is really going to be commercially valuable. So typically you want to push those decisions up. But anyway, that's just just highlighting 2 of the uncertainties that come in. So if we could kind of move to the next slide. So when doing a budget for, a patent budget for a client or a company, we'll typically break out the fees and expenditures into preparation and filing expenditures and prosecution expenditures, and I think it's very helpful to break those out. Typically the preparation and filing expenditures tend to be more predictable and more controllable than the prosecution fees and expenses. But even with the prosecution, with the preparation and filing fees, there are a bunch of variables that can creep in there. Are you going to be filing provisional patent applications versus utility filings, and are those utility filings continuations? And again, the foreign filing question that I mentioned earlier. So even with there are it's not really just a simple equation of, are we going to file this many applications next year? What's the budget? And then on the prosecution side of things, often we'll see the what we call the kind of prosecution costs snowball. The more cases you have in the portfolio, and as they're progressing through the patent office, that's a snowball that tends to gather steam and gather costs. And certainly there are cases that are being allowed and kind of falling out of the prosecution snowball, but by and large that tends to take a while to reach steady state for most companies. And if a client is asking for how do we cut the budget by 10% next year, for example, if we look at this prosecution leg, it really is a bit of a difficult decision, and you typically don't want to be making just-in-time decisions there. For example, if you receive an office action, and it may be if you want to abandon 10% of your portfolio in order to reduce that, to make that decision as individual office actions come in is tricky, because you might not want to be abandoning. It might be a key case, and you obviously want to prune the less valuable assets if you are going to looking to cut costs over there. So just a plug for some of the other presentations. We've talked about doing portfolio analysis and ranking and rating, and really having your portfolio organized and ranked and rated, so you know which are your most valuable assets and which are your least valuable assets. Going in can be very helpful to reduce the prosecution spend. So when an office action comes in on a case, it's then you kind of know, relative to our whole portfolio, is this a lower or higher value case, and that can assist with the decision making there. So just an aside on that front. Take in mind we're going to be looking at budgeting for prep and then for prosecution. If we go to the next slide, I'm just going to quickly go through some budgeting approaches. So and these approaches are arranged according to sophistication, so let me put it that way. So the first one is really looking at the docket report and saying, okay, what do we know is coming up in the next 3 months? and what are the estimates for that. So typically we can use kind of the docket report plus a bit of guesstimating for a shorter time frame, typically a 3-month outlook. But obviously, we have no idea typically beyond the 3 months what's going to happen. And as far as office action goes with respect to prosecution, and even if you are looking at a docket at any point in time and looking 3 months out, there may be some events that are going to occur within that 3-month period that would not appear on the docket. Something may come in with a final office action, for example, which has a 2-month response date, or there might be something which just you want to respond to more quickly. So I'd say that's probably the easiest and the least sophisticated. The second approach, which is more useful for doing longer term budgeting, if you were doing a budget for a year or 2 quarters, is looking at historical data and then building in some projections. And then the third approach and the most sophisticated is deploying machine learning plus projections to estimate what your budget may be for the next year. So moving on to the next slide. This is a screenshot of a spreadsheet that we use internally for some clients to generate budget projections for a year. And this would correspond to the second tab on the previous slide, where we look at historical data plus projections. And what you'll see here is the yellow fields are input fields, and we can plug in various numbers over here, which then kind of spits out that the pie chart you see on the right there, showing for a particular year US prep and filing, non-US preparation. So basically, preparation of or preparation and filing of non-US applications, and a similar breakout for prosecution, US prosecution and non-US prosecution, and then also kind of miscellaneous counseling work. In the second set of yellow boxes over there, you'll see filing assumptions, and that's where we will typically ask the client for various types of applications. What are you planning for the next year? And we'll also show them their data in the column next to that, which is headed previous year, how many of those types of applications they filed in the previous year. So for this example client, they might have said to us, we want to file 16 original new applications, 5 conversions, I think it's 10 cons and 5 provisionals, etc. So we'll plug all those numbers in, and that really populates the preparation row in the kind of table above that. The more where we estimate, we bring in the estimations based on historical data, is more on the prosecution, which is the second row on the top table over there. You'll see it says pros monthly, and those inputs, the 18,000, 3,000, those are really generated based on looking at what was spent in the previous year and doing some regression analysis, and typically linear regression analysis on the previous year or 2 years of data. And so the next slide will show us how we get that. But just before we move on, so those numbers are inputted based on historical data. And using this technique of inputting the filing assumptions, how many cases do you think you're going to file this next year? Also, then from the prosecution side of things, looking at what was your spend last year, and kind of projecting that out to this year. We found that to be pretty accurate, actually, and it normally gets us pretty close to the pin on an estimate. So if we can move to the next slide. This is an example of a graph that we might use, which uses a linear regression analysis to project, foreign prosecution costs and US prosecution costs. And basically what we do is we take the accounting records, label all of the cost items as either being US or foreign prosecution, and then graph it and do a trend line on that, and basically just eyeball into the middle of next, for example, if we're doing the budget for 2022, in the middle of that year, what does that number look like, and use that as the input into the sheet that we've got before. And as I mentioned, that tends to be fairly accurate. So next slide, just moving on to now machine learning. So this is something we are working on internally at the moment. And what we're shooting for here is really to take two sets of data, and there's applicant-specific data or company-specific data and patent office data, and really train a model based on that data. For the applicant-specific data, what we're looking at is financial data. So we'll, similar to the graph I showed before, where we'll break out US versus international costs and also preparation versus prosecution costs, and put that into the model, but also portfolio data, when and where would be, geographically, where do you have cases pending at the moment, and also when were they filed? What is the age of those cases? What art units are they in? And then also analyzing the file wrapper data to kind of just see, is there any activity happening? Has the patent office done anything which indicates that they may issue an office action, in the next year or in the next 3 months or whatever the time frame is. And then the patent office data, really looking at broadly across an art unit, or even at an examiner level, how quickly does this examiner pick up cases? How many first office action allowances do they get? We can kind of process all of that into the model as well, and then kind of combine those two sets of data into a model, which helps us to generate projections for clients. Steve, did you want to?
I think you summed it up pretty well, Andre. But we have modeled a number of the art units now, pretty much every one of them, except for I think maybe design patents at this point. But by taking patent office data, we're able to predict the likelihood of any one major prosecution event occurring in the future based on the current state of an application. So if it's, you basically tell the model, give it an XML file that might represent or does represent the prosecution history, and it'll take that as an input and spit out probabilities for the next 8 quarters. And then by multiplying those by the typical budget expenses that a client allocates for those, you can get an estimate of what a pending application is going to cost on average, or statistically probability wise for the next 2 years. And then you've mentioned all the other factors that go into this. You have to have, of course, account for the new cases being introduced, which would not be in the model for the existing cases, and so on and so forth. But it gives us some idea of what's going to happen next on any given case, and we take it across a large number of cases. The prediction is pretty accurate.
Well, thanks, Steve. So yeah, just one final slide from me, the next one, just to also highlight some other budgeting tools that are out there. Quantify IP, which has been acquired by Nakwa, has global IP estimator, which is a tool that can provide budgeting estimates, and we internally use that to provide estimates to our clients, particularly for foreign filing. If they're asking, what's the estimated cost of if we foreign file in these number of countries. CPA Global also has a product called Forecast, IP financial modeling, and then just a little plug for our internal tool here, which we've codenamed Costradamus.ai, which will be AI-driven IP budgeting. But anyway, that's all I have. Michelle, sorry, I forget who's next. But
I think Bob is next, or is it Jill? I forget. Is it Jill?
It is Jill.
Jill,
Yeah.
sorry. Okay, go ahead, Jill.
Okay, thanks, Jill.
Unless Bob wants to
Thank
speak
you,
to
Andre.
time entry. So to start with, I think anyone who's done time entry can agree that can be a necessary but laborious task. So what we've tried to do is take the sting out of time entry with some various tools and innovations. So with that, our main entry system is Foundation IP. And with that, we have Foundation IP is feature rich in its components. And that allows time to be entered and associated with specific actions. so we can better track what that billing entry applies to. And it also allows us to pull reports and get an understanding of the amount of billing per the individual items. And that, as Andre just was referring to, can help us with our budgeting and our forecasting. Also, it's very accessible for the attorneys to look up and monitor the billing for their clients in that system without having to actually access our main accounting system. So the accounting system is Aderant, and this is where the heavy lifting of the billing entry actually occurs. And our accounting staff then will intake the entries from FIP, and I'll explain that process in a moment. But this is then, the Aderant has processes that will combine these billing entries into our detailed billing reports in various formats for the attorneys to review at the end of the month. So the beauty of Foundation IP is that it has a very robust API web service component. And with that, we're able to leverage that to get entries into that system that don't always require to have to be manually entered. And it also allows us to intake entries from other origination tools and get them into Foundation IP, because that's the main where everything accumulates that will eventually go into the accounting system. So FIP has a process that will download the billing entries at the end of the month or whatever points of the month we deem we're going to do a download. And it puts it into an Excel format. And then we can take that Excel format, we then reformat it with our middleware into a format that can be uploaded into the accounting system via their importer routine. So we've got a very nice workflow to take it out of Foundation IP, make sure it's formatted properly, and then upload it into the accounting system. And it's a pretty seamless process. It does require a couple button pushes at the end of the month, but other than that, it flows pretty easily. Next slide, please. So how do we keep track of work and enter it into our system? So we do have several methods in which we can track and upload billing entries into the main entry system. Obviously, we can manually enter it into Foundation IP. And with that, the FIP interface is relatively straightforward. And it's also designed to facilitate entry by matter, or you can do it from a billing screen if you want to enter several matters consecutively. So it does give you several options and also different ways to view it once you've entered it. So you can look at it in a list form, in a grid form, in a calendar form, where you can view how many hours you've entered for each day for that month. So there's a variety of ways that you can view that once it's in there. We also do provide a designated Excel template that can be used to enter your time for the month. And then we will take that spreadsheet at the end of the month and upload it in bulk using the API and FIP to get it into that system. Another way that we have is we allow people to actually email entries to an email address. So we've created a format that can be used in an Outlook email with the necessary information, such as the rate, the timekeeper, the hours, a description, and what action code you would like it to go into FIP. The matter number goes in the subject line, so it's pretty straightforward. And then you email it to a specific email box where it is picked up and processed. Once it's processed, the confirmation of success or failure in creating the entry is then communicated back to the sender. And just recently, an attorney has actually made a little widget that can run on a PC or a Mac that is more conducive to not having to repeat the same information in the Outlook email all the time. So you can default in your timekeeper and your rate and those types of things. And then it will actually create the email and send it on to the proper email address. Next slide, please. And lastly, we do have automated billing entries. These aren't the norm necessarily, but they do, when we do have certain fixed fees that get applied based on the completion of certain actions, such as an office action or whatever else the case may be, we can at the end of the month look at all of those that have been completed and upload in bulk, we can upload the fixed fees to those specific actions in Foundation IP, again, using the API. And that's time entry.
Thanks, Jill. And I guess at this point, move over to Bob.
Yeah, I don't, you can pass this slide. Steve, were you going to talk about?
Oh, yeah, sorry. I
billing
guess
tools?
I've got a slide here basically in here. So what Jill has been talking about is putting time entries in from, in an automated way, or transferring time in an automated way from our Foundation IP system into our accounting system. What we've found is, try as we might to provide task coding that matches up with our clients' rules for billing, we inevitably find that wrong task codes are getting chosen by some of our staff when they are performing certain tasks. And there's always a little bit of, I guess we call it shaggy coding going on. And so what we realized at the firm was, we're submitting these invoices into electronic billing systems, which are, for the most part, that's how the task codes are checked against their billing rules. And we realized we should probably have our own computerized review on our end that can help make sure everything is getting coded correctly, which you would hope it would go incorrect, but there's so many different codes for so many different clients that are constantly evolving. It's hard to keep up with any one person. You've got 120, 30 attorneys, trying to teach them every nuance of all the clients that they may work on is very difficult. Even the staff have a hard time keeping up with it that are working on those clients. So we've developed some tools, and we're kind of in the beta test mode right now, where we load in our clients' rules, and then we use automation to check to see if the tasks that are coming out of our billing systems match up with the appropriate tasks that are permitted to be billed on. And we're working on it, and we figure it's if we have one computer that can figure out what to give to the next computer, that's better than people trying to tell what to give to the computer. So they can have conversations hopefully in the future and negotiate over our fees. But with that, I'll turn it back to Bob and let him kind of introduce his piece, which will talk a lot about these coding things and what happens when you don't get things coded correctly.
All right. So my name is Bob Brace. I'm the executive director at Schwegman Lundberg Wisner. And in this portion of the presentation, we're going to talk about the accounting systems, how they've evolved through time over the course of my career and where they're at now. The other people that are going to speak during this time is going to be Kelly Ebert, who does our billing, and Sheena Devine, who is our accounting manager. And Kelly will be going over the billing in a little bit more detail, and Sheena will be going over the payments. Over the past 25 years, I've witnessed many changes to how accounting departments process work, and those changes will continue. I think it was a Greek philosopher 2,500 years ago that said, change is the only constant in life. Permanence is just an illusion. Today, change is happening exponentially, so it takes constant effort to stay competitive. One of the factors driving a lot of change in the intellectual property space is pricing power. In the current market and over the past few decades, IP law has been under tremendous amount of pricing pressure. Because of the pressure, firms practicing in the IP space must adapt. In our firm, the pressure has helped create a culture of change, acceptance, and automation. To address the pricing pressure, it has been my goal and the goal of the firm's leadership to automate as many processes as possible and to contract with third parties to keep our headcount low to flat. This in turn will help keep our overhead down, which allows us to compete in a tight market. As a philosophy, I don't like plugging in long-term expenses, such as employees, and I hate to say that, but that is how I view employees from a financial aspect. I don't like plugging in long-term expenses to short-term problems or problems that can be automated. In law firm finance, your biggest expense will always be tied to your employees. The only way to stay competitive in an environment where you have limited pricing power is to fund automation to keep the head count, flat and to a minimum. So I'm going to talk a little bit now about the evolution of the enterprise software systems. One of the first changes that I saw coming into the business was this move from these character-based systems to graphical user interfaces or GUI interfaces. This change really created a lot of challenges. There was a decline in productivity, increase in system complexity, more hardware to support internally, system maintenance requirements, much more expensive. The list goes on and on. I'm going to focus mostly on the decline in productivity because I think it drove a lot of the software that has been developed and that can be add-ons to these enterprise systems. Character-based systems were faster for doing manual input work. You could memorize keystrokes so that you never had to look away from your source documents. When the GUI interface was introduced, everything took twice as long to do because the mouse was introduced, which forced people to look away from their documents, click tabs, and there were lots of tabs when these systems first came out. It just didn't flow well. Character-based systems were also very stable. We had very few issues, and a lot of these systems ran on Unix. To address the productivity shortcomings created by the GUI systems, many businesses started producing software add-ons that could interface with the enterprise software systems and streamline aspects of your accounting process. Invoices were being generated through word processing systems. Companies were just doing macros. They were selling systems. There was basically macros pulling information out of your accounting system and doing all the formatting in word processing. Expense systems that allowed invoices to be directly uploaded by vendors, reducing the need for manual input. That's another way they've streamlined it. Once uploaded, AI pulls the necessary information and presents it to an internal approver. After the approver, it flows directly into the accounting system. And with COVID, this has even become more accelerated and much more commonplace. It isn't uncommon that your vendors now and your clients now everybody wants to upload directly into your systems to get rid of that manual entry. Our firm uses Concur as its expense system. Invoices, credit card transactions, and receipts are directly uploaded, approved, and flow directly into the accounting system. Our clients use many different billing/expense systems, and in my opinion, this has been the biggest challenge for law firm accounting departments. Billing has become extraordinarily complex in IP firms. Over accounting, our accounting department billers are asked to work and learn in multiple expense systems, billing systems. They must address rejections, formatting issues, new client rules, and they must enter a lot of back office information that wasn't the responsibility of companies like ours in the past. Okay. So streamlining this work is our biggest concern. Let me back up there. So this is my biggest concern moving forward is the billing process. And so to address this, we have contacted Aderant, who Jill mentioned is our accounting system. It's really our total enterprise system. But so we contacted Aderant, and we're going to go with a software called BillBlast. And it's designed so that we can upload all of our leads invoices into one system that communicates with all the other outside expense systems, that our clients are utilizing, which should help our billers out. They don't have to learn multiple systems. They don't have to check multiple systems, load into multiple systems. BillBlast they're going to take care of all the rule changes from our clients, and we will also not have to deal with that internally. And once all the bills have been uploaded, they are sent to various expense systems. Then rejections flow back to the BillBlast So now you can see all the rejections in one place, and instead of going through multiple billing systems, which it's so inefficient, and you can miss a lot of things that you need to get addressed. So, and it also will provide us a dashboard so that some of the people in leadership can actually check and see, you know, where everything is at, what the rejections are doing, where the invoices are at. And so we'll be able to have a lot more transparency into that process. We're hoping with the, yep.
Maybe I could just interject too. I mean, the one of the downsides of the electronic billing, it has many upsides, which is fast processing. But when something does get, I know you mentioned this, but when something, we've seen cases where, you know, like a discrepancy over a photocopy charge or something, which is probably a bad example because we don't charge for photocopies, but something of that nature holds up a large invoice. And I've even seen some pretty big invoices that if you don't resolve that item before the end of the client's fiscal window, we've not been paid for like an amount of money that's 100 times what the discrepancy was. I just mentioned that how important this bill blast is to help us.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's absolutely right. And that's one of the things we really have to address that can slow down your revenue cycle if you're not out there addressing all the rejections that you're getting. But you have to depend on people that are, you know, very busy doing all the uploads, and they're, you know, and sometimes they get bad messages back where they don't realize it's rejected. And yes, and things get rejected over, you know, very minor issues. So
and they all get the same level of importance as far as the billing system is concerned. It doesn't sort of give you a break for tiny discrepancies.
Right. And you do have, you know, clients now that are requiring, you know, in 90 days, they have to have everything in front of them. Otherwise, you can no longer bill for that. And so, you know, you have to get this under control. And when I say it's my biggest concern, that's why it is the one thing that can really slow down your revenue cycle and you know, cause you to have cash issues short term. I'm going to talk a little bit about the additional productivity increases that occurred through the credit card processing companies. They take all the data storage issues surrounding confidential information, and they will place buttons on your website for electronic payments. The confidential information alone is reason enough to work with one of these credit card companies. It removes the liability of a data breach of confidential information. So we don't keep any credit card information and so forth in the firm. That's just stored elsewhere with the company that we work with. And this model is just more commonplace with subscription services now. Another productivity boost has been from the banks themselves. Because of the low interest rate environment over the past 20 years, banks have to find different revenue streams, and many banks have started to develop new products to reduce the manual entry still occurring in some accounting departments. One type of product being offered is the ability for the bank to match your outstanding invoices with payments. That way you can have all your payments flowing directly into the bank. They do all the processing, match everything, provide you a file, they send it to us, and you upload it. So you're not dealing with sitting there and entering checks matter by matter. And, you know, some of your clients can have 100 matters. Let's see here. And the same thing can be done on the AP side. So on the invoicing side and on the AP side, you simply will upload your files into the bank, and the bank will just make sure everything matches that flows back through. And so on the AP side, we upload all of our checks with the amounts, and they have to match in order to clear. And yesterday, we actually had someone try to cash a $48,000 check against our account. And the check looked completely professional. And if we didn't have this in place, that it would just got it rejected automatically, it probably would have cleared our bank. So you have to talk to your bank and put these things in place. With the cyber issues that are going on now, it just makes sense. And I'm just the final thing I'm going to talk about is, you know, where I see things currently. And what I'm seeing is now you're just moving from this internal system that you've been hosting to these subscription web-based enterprise systems. And the downside to that is you might have some increased costs annually to maintain your accounting system, but those should be offset by costs associated with buying hardware, maintaining the hardware, storage, your cloud storage, maintenance contracts and so forth will go away. And you should be able to get more robust security under one platform because it's just too expensive for all these companies to buy that on their own. So if you can go through a web-based solution that has a lot of good security, you remove a lot of liability, and plus you should be able to access your data from anywhere. And with that, I am going to pass it over to Kelly.
Thank you, Bob. So currently we have about 100 clients that are uploaded into e-billing systems. The most used e-billing systems that we currently use are Legal Tracker, Simple Legal, Collaborati, Time Metrics, 360, and some of our clients even have created their own e-billing system. Next slide. We work with the client to make sure timekeeper information, phase task codes, matters, reference numbers are uploaded into the e-billing system before we can submit the invoice. Some of the pros of working with e-billing systems are the invoices can be uploaded directly to the client as opposed to email or snail mail. It's a good tracking or budgeting tool for the client where they can track spending as a whole client or per matter. And it also improves the speed of payment. Once the invoice is approved, the invoice is then sent directly to AP for payment. Some of the cons of e-billing are rejections due to timekeeper information or matters not being in the e-billing system. This then creates a lag for us to upload the invoice and then subsequently payment. Or extra time it takes for us in billing to upload the invoice. We might have to make many manual changes to phase and task codes, get additional invoice backups in order to get the invoice uploaded properly. And now Sheena will talk about accounts receivable.
Hey, Kelly, can I ask you a question real quick?
Yeah.
You know, like how often are you waiting for information to be put in maybe from a client? You know, because I know that's another issue that we're having with systems like this is that, you know, your clients have to put in information so that we can put in information, and sometimes that can bottleneck.
I just actually had a client this morning that I was uploading an invoicing for, and I'm waiting for about 5 matters to be uploaded into their e-billing, into their system so I can submit the rest of the invoice for this month. So it happens quite frequently with a lot of our clients.
Yeah, and that's a tough one to address because, you know, these are our clients, and we're trying to provide a good service to them, and so you have to really kind of kid gloves with this kind of stuff.
Yeah, you don't want to be nagging either with them. So
yeah. All right. Sheena?
Okay, thanks, Kelly. So just as we've seen a shift in billing and technology, we've also seen a shift in the way clients are paying their invoices. We have seen a drastic decline in the amount of paper checks we are receiving and an increase in the electronic payments that come in. This shift really started in 2018 and 19 when we saw a high volume of more electronic payments than paper checks. We saw that it was important to have several payment options available to accommodate our clients' needs, which is why we added an e-check option and a PayPal option to go along with our credit card, wire, and ACH payment options, just so there was an array of ways that clients can get payment to us. The check payments then really started to dwindle in 2020 when we had many people working from home. We went from depositing checks daily to just once a week. And we also requested that all our clients, if possible, pay us electronically instead of paper checks through the mail, as the mail had gotten delayed, and that delayed our check payments or our payments to us. We saw a 40% increase in our credit card payments in 2019, which that continues to increase at an average of 30% per year. So we see a lot of even larger clients starting to use credit cards now as a way of making payments on large invoices. So in order to meet that demand, and as Bob had said, we use a third-party credit card processor called LawPay. Formerly, they were called Client Pay. That way, clients can go onto a payment portal and they can make payments on their own time. And through that payment portal, we can accept credit cards, debit cards, e-checks, and PayPal. That portal is not only convenient for our clients, but it also has also freed up time in the AR department. Since we had seen a increase in volume of credit card payments, it was increasing our time that we spent processing those credit cards and playing that occasional phone tag with clients to get their credit card information. Also, using LawPay for this service, as Bob mentioned, has helped us create a secure system for collecting payments and staying PCI compliant, and having that secure way for clients to make a payment to us. In order to inform all of our clients of our payment options, we added an electronic payment information on all of our invoices that go out, all of our statements of account that go out, as well as links in our signature block for clients just to click on and make a payment quick on their invoices. The collection of payments has changed as e-payments evolved. E-billing and e-payments have led to a reduction in our collection time and has reduced our aging significantly, especially that over 150 days. We no longer have to wait for mail time for invoices to go out and for checks to come in. We see a majority of our clients who pay on our payment portal, they tend to pay within 30 days of less of the invoice date. Again, I think that it's easy. We send them an email with their invoice with a link to our payment portal. So it's easy for them to just hop on and pay that invoice quickly. So that payment portal has really brought down the amount of time it takes to collect on an invoice. And then a majority of our e-bill clients, they tend to pay within 60 days of a successful invoice submission to their e-billing system, which again is really important that we get that successful submission so that they can pay in their payment terms. Some of the benefits we see by using e-billing and e-payments are more timely payments, a heightened security, a better access to data for both us and our clients. And I think client satisfaction will also be a benefit to the e-billing and e-payment systems that we've put into place. Next slide, please. So some projects that we are working on in AR to automate these processes, and I know Bob has touched on a couple of them, but one is Vantage Point, which is it's a US bank automation tool that matches up our ACH and wire payments that come in daily to our outstanding invoices in Aderant, which can then be imported into Aderant for allocation. This takes away a manual step in our cash receipt process, which will reduce our time spent entering cash receipts. Another project is with LawPay and integrating that with Aderant, which is, once that gets into place, it's going to be a huge time saver for us. This is where clients, they can go into the payment portal and they'll be able to see a big picture of all of their outstanding invoices. If they go in to just pay one invoice and they have more outstanding, they're going to be able to see all of their outstanding invoices right there and be able to hopefully click on all of them and pay them or choose which ones to pay. Through this integration, we'll also be able to send our clients a specific payment link for a specific invoice. So if we know a client pays by credit card a majority of the time and they missed an invoice, we can just send them a link. They can click on that link and it'll go directly to pay that specific invoice that we were talking about. And LawPay will also be able to send out reminders on our behalf that then can be automated, sent out automatically until that payment has been received. So that'll be a huge time saver as well. And then at the end of the day, LawPay will import those credit card and e-check payments into Aderant for allocation, which again will take away that manual process for us, saving us time. And then finally, Bill Blast will also help on the AR side. That's just that collective view of all of our outstanding invoices that are billed through the e-billing systems that Kelly mentioned. We'll be able to see when the invoices were rejected, reduced, disputed, or sent to AP all in one place, which will really help with collections on those specific invoices. And it'll help us realize the rejected invoices sooner so that we can resubmit them and collect faster. So those are the exciting things happening in accounting.
And everything that happens, what we're talking about an increase in our productivity. We're just being much more efficient, and that will just help us keep our staffing down. And some of these things that Sheena mentioned with credit cards, these things aren't going away. A lot of these big companies are using credit cards, they're getting cash back and so forth. We do the same thing with the fees that we pay to the US Patent Office. We're using credit cards and we're using that carry time and we're getting cash back for it. So these methods are all gonna stay around. I think that it will increase some of your banking expenses, definitely going to increase your credit card charges. But this is the wave of the future. And, I just, Sheena, are we going to put Bitcoin in place? That's a joke.
No, not at the moment.
That's next.
So I guess, thank you very much. That was a very informative presentation, everybody. I guess somebody posited the question of how does work from home, affect any of these topics that we've discussed. And right off the top of my head, nothing comes to mind. I think the accounting department, as a rule, tends to come into the office because of the systems and procedures they use more often than anybody else. In fact, I think you guys are probably in the office the most during the pandemic. But any other panelists have any thoughts about that question?
The only thing that it really affected, it just accelerated this transition to electronic billing, payments, just getting rid of all that paper. And that's actually been a blessing. It's much nicer to get things that way. It's faster, like Sheena said. And, when you're trying to, all these productivity and efficiencies you're putting in place is really to shorten your revenue cycle. And, your revenue cycle, every day that you go out, it costs your company cash. So the first year you can really shorten that, you will capture that cash that would have been pushed out into other years, and you should have a much better year.
Well, with that, see no further questions. I'm going to just thank everybody again and turn it back over to Michelle to wrap this up.
Thanks, Steve. Thank you for joining us, everyone, and thank you to our speakers. The last episode of the Digital Transformation series will take place on September 9th, when we discuss an SLW digital transformation case study in recruiting, onboarding, training, and firm communications. You can find the registration page on the SLW Institute on the SLW website, and please keep an eye out for the email invitations as well. And please do join us for the last episode of the series. Thank you again for joining us, and be well.